right, hold on.
We are live on the YouTube.
Great, so I think we can begin.
Shall we begin now? All right, thank you, Sean. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Dr. Maisha Reza, and I am the chairperson of the Commonwealth Students Association and a trustee of the 100 Million campaign. Welcome to this virtual summit organized by and for young people from around the world to share our alternative perspective ahead of the upcoming G20 meeting. This meeting, jointly organized by the world's largest representative youth organization through the 100 Million campaign and the Global Student Forum. Today's summit is called A Fair Share for Our Future, and together we will be looking at the impact of the world's incredibly unequal response to COVID-19 these last 6 months, analyzing how this has happened and setting out what we want. A report in September showed the shocking truth about the global COVID-19 response, where out of $8 trillion, just 0.13% had been dedicated to multilateral appeals. In contrast, if the 20% of children living on less than $2 a day received their fair share of these funds, it would have saved over 70 million lives in the next 10 years. The 100 Million campaign and the Global Students Forum helped to bring together youth and activists and student leaders from across 45 countries earlier this week to discuss these issues, and the response that we had was remarkable, showing the tenacity and the unity of young people around the world. Incredible ideas, passion and solidarity that showed the world leaders what global cooperation could be and should be like. Frankly speaking, there was anger. Anger because we are on the ground seeing the devastating impact of this incredibly unfair global response. And we know just how much difference a more equal COVID response could have had. We call for justice for the most marginalized and to share the truth about what has been going on. In the next hour and a half, we will be hearing from youth activists from 15 different countries, from Brazil to Italy and from India to Malawi. These young leaders will share the reality for marginalized children in their countries during the crisis. We will also hear from a global young parliamentarian leader, a Nobel laureate, and from the world's largest teacher trade union. When all of our voices come together, we will make an echoing and lasting impact. For those of you joining us and those of you posting on social media, please use the hashtag #JusticeForEveryChild. The 100 Million campaign and the Global Students Forum are organizing this event together, and I am really delighted to introduce Ankit, who is on the steering committee of the Global Student Forum and who will add his welcome to this event.
Hello, everyone. Greetings to you from the true north, strong and mighty, nation of the moose, as well as homeland of maple syrup, Canada. Firstly, thank you, Mesha. There's a great deal of power in your perspective. During the course of the pandemic, national responses throughout the world fell short in some way, shape, or form. Many responses left out several marginalized communities, while some even using this opportunity to oppress those voices further. But I'd like to identify a specific group that often slips the mind of policymakers, a group that is too shy to speak up, and one that is a huge victim to the growing right-wing populism that we are seeing all around the world. I am talking about international students. I am an international student from India residing in Canada since 2016. We're a strange intersection of student population where immigrant meets student, and sometimes even some people of color amongst us, and other intersections. As migrants, most national responses have left us out of any support and left us out to fend for ourselves. These poor policies are usually guided by myths about us as a group. Why don't you just go home? Aren't international students supposed to be rich? Ask your government to support you. Why should I pay for your stimulus check? These myths have been around for too long, but to dispel them, we need the support of allies. Active support, not passive. Some of the wealthiest nations in the world are competing to increase international student populations in your countries for both financial and social capital that we bring with us. However, when it comes to providing support, we don't even receive lip service, let alone any real policy support. To the student leaders and young activists in the global north, please create spaces and institutional structures for us to participate and make our voices heard. We don't get a vote, but we still pay taxes. Many international students travel from developing G20 countries to the developed ones. Why am I telling you all this? You see, migrants are often the exception to many public services in countries, a group of people who are living everyday lives that are the same as, if not harder than, any other person within their class in the country. Yet our access to public services is severely diminished, almost as though we don't contribute to them. A lot of the work relies on you folks here today. We need national students' unions to organize international and migrant student groups to equip us with tools, tactics, to keep us fighting for our rights. Democratic participation is a lot more than the right to vote, but if you're here, you already know that. We need you folks to get on board with this fight because the students united will never be defeated. As for the G20, we've seen a lot of talk from world leaders about the world coming together, but so far there's been very little action. As more countries move back into lockdowns, with others still battling the first wave, it is essential to build an understanding of just how unequal the response has been and to correct it before it's too late. We have heard over and over again that they are running out of funds to continue helping the marginalized members of our community. But we do not seem to find a shortage of funds when it comes to bailing out big multinational corporations that are disproportionately less affected by this pandemic. And if you believe in capitalism, then you should know that this is supposed to be a period of contraction anyway. That's the boom and bust cycle, something both Keynes and Hayek agreed on. The way humanity responds collectively to the crisis today will determine the future that we build for our children and the future of our people. The world's unjust economic response to COVID-19 has already deepened the global inequality for at least one generation. The most marginalized and vulnerable have been left to fend for themselves, and millions of children will pay the price with their lives unless we act now. Young people and students are at a crossroads between fulfilling our economic potential in the long run through education and contributing to our family's sustenance and our basic survival. This is an extremely unfair choice that we are having to make for poor decisions of the world leaders. We need leaders to act in partnership with student, youth, NGOs, and not-for-profit organizations. Young people are no longer just demanding resources and support from government and leaders. We are demanding accountability. We're ready to work with you as partners to ensure that we do not lose a generation due to lack of access to education. The world must back up its claims of multilateralism and universal rights to ensure that the most marginalized children are protected through and beyond this crisis. We need you to make bold and unconventional commitments, moving away from popular decisions and towards allocating sufficient resources to the most vulnerable children and families. Not just with cash handouts, which are short-term solutions, sure, but couple it with solutions to tackle multiple forms of deprivation, such as improved access to healthcare, free, high-quality public education for everybody. I look forward to hearing the discussions on all of these issues today. I will now hand you over to Alex from the Organizing Bureau of European School Students Union, who is the facilitator for the first session. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Alexandra Seibal. I'm a board member of the Organizing Bureau of European Secondary School Student Unions, and I'm facilitating the next part of the meeting, and I'm delighted that, as we already heard, we have such an incredible lineup of speakers with activists from over 15 countries, as well as a parliamentarian, a Nobel laureate, and a trade unions activist. We have seen an incredibly unequal global response to COVID-19, with those that need the most help getting the least. We will start the sessions today by looking at the consequences of this, specifically what has been happening to young people in marginalized communities over the last 6 months, and what will happen if we fail to provide a fair share. Because we know we can and we have to do better. I will be strict on time, and I make no apologies for this, as it is the only way we can hear from activists from such a diverse range of countries. Everyone has 3 minutes, and I will interrupt to let speakers know when the time is up. First off, I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, Blessing Okebugwo, who has recently formed 100 Million Nigeria with other youth activists in Nigeria, which is working to protect vulnerable adolescent girls during this crisis. Blessing, how are children in rural communities being impacted by lockdowns and school closures? I see Blessing has not connected yet, so we can wait a bit if she's connecting. So we will move on to the next panelist. Good. Next, or first, we will hear from Mtshoto, who has been working on the Mukti Caravan, which has been doing some amazing work in recent months in some of the most marginalized communities in Bihar, in India. MD's remarks will have an extra 3 minutes for translation. What has been the impact on children as families are hit by the economic impact of COVID-19?
Chotu?
Yeah.
छोटू अनम्यूट करके आप बोलोगे क्या?
जी जी
जी स्टार्ट। हाँ,
आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। मेरा नाम मोहम्मद छोटू है और मैं बिहार कटिहार का रहने वाला हूँ। आज से तकरीबन 10 से 11 साल पहले मैं एक बंधुआ मजदूर था, जो कि केला सत्यार्थी द्वारा चलाए जा रहे बचपन बचाओ आंदोलन के थ्रू मैं रेस्क्यू हुआ और अभी बाल आश्रम जयपुर में लेके गया मुझे, और वहां पर मैं अपनी आगे की शिक्षा प्राप्त की और अभी मैं मुक्ति कारवा को लीड कर रहा हूँ, जो कि मुक्ति कारवा अभी बिहार के 10 जिलों में चलाए जा रहे हैं। और मुक्ति कारवा का उद्देश्य है कि हर बच्चा स्कूल जाए, हर बच्चा सुरक्षित है। तो उन जिलों में हम लोग चला रहे हैं जहां से ज्यादातर बच्चों के साथ ट्रैफिकिंग, बाल यौन शोषण, बाल दुर्व्यवहार हो रहे हैं। तो हम लोग उन 10 जिले में जा करके हमारी एक्टिविस्ट, हम लोग मुखिया सरपंच से मिलते हैं और वार्ड मेंबर, पंचायत में जाकर मीटिंग करते हैं, छोटी छोटी सभा करते हैं और ब्लॉक लेवल पर छोटी छोटी समस्या को लेकर जाते हैं ताकि हमारी समस्या को सुने, और गांव में जा करके लोगों से बात करते हैं, पर्चे वितरण के माध्यम से, नुक्कड़ नाटक के माध्यम से, फिल्म स्क्रीन के माध्यम से, ताकि हमारी आवाज, हमारी बात को उन लोग अच्छे से सुने, अच्छे से समझे। हम अपने बारे में भी बताते हैं कि जो हमारे साथ हुआ है और बाकी किसी भी भाई बहन के साथ ना हो, इस प्रकार की समस्या गांव में जाकर के बताते हैं और उनको रोकथाम के लिए इस चीज को आगे करते हैं। और अभी मैं कुछ बच्चों को पढ़ाता हूँ, अपने गांव में पढ़ाता हूँ, इसलिए कि मैं लॉकडाउन अभी जो है हमारे पूरे भारत में, पूरे विश्व में लॉकडाउन लगे हुए थे और कुछ महीने से बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जा पा रहे थे, स्कूल बंद थे और प्राइवेट स्कूल बंद थे, कॉलेज बंद थे, तो कहीं जा नहीं पा रहे थे। तो बच्चे ट्रैफिकिंग के शिकार हो रहे थे ज्यादातर यहाँ से, हमारे गांव से, हमारे आसपास के गांव से। तो मेरे को ये चीज बहुत खराब लगी कि हम लोग इतने काम करने के बावजूद हमारा काम असफल हो रहा है। तो मैंने अपनी काबिलियत पर ऊपर अभी मैं अपने गांव में 40 बच्चों को पढ़ाता हूं, जो कि 18 से कम उम्र के सारे बच्चे हैं, और कुछ बच्चे जो हमारे बीवे के थ्रू रेस्क्यू किए गए हैं वो बच्चे हैं, और कुछ गांव के बच्चे हैं, और वो सभी बच्चे मेरे पास अभी पढ़ते हैं क्योंकि उनके माँ बाप इतना सक्षम नहीं कि अपने बच्चों को पढ़ा सके प्राइवेट स्कूल में और सरकारी स्कूल में। जो कोरोना काल का है, जो बाढ़ के मौसम में ज्यादातर ट्रैफिक लोग आते हैं, ट्रैफिक लोग, और गांव में माँ बाप को बहला फुसला करके यहाँ से दूर शहर लेके जाते हैं। पंजाब हो गया, छत्तीसगढ़ हुआ, इस प्रकार की समस्या को लोग अच्छे से फायदा उठाता है। तो इसमें माँ बाप, बच्चे इस समस्या को लेकर जूझता है। तो मैं अभी मुक्ति कारवा को अपने गांव में, अपने आसपास के पूरे गांव में चला रहा हूं, और मैं चाहता हूं कि हर बच्चा स्कूल जाए, हर बच्चा सुरक्षित रहे, किसी भी बच्चे के साथ ट्रैफिकिंग ना हो, किसी भी बच्चे के साथ बाल दुर्व्यवहार ना हो। तो भाई साहब जी के थ्रू ये चलाए जा रहे कैलाश सत्यार्थी चिल्ड्रन फाउंडेशन के थ्रू मुक्ति कारवा अभियान, इसमें मैं बहुत अच्छा मुझे लग रहा है इसमें काम करने में, और मुझे बहुत मजा भी आ रहा है, क्योंकि जब भी कोई एक बच्चे को मैं मुक्त
I am
कराता
very
हूँ।
sorry to interrupt, but we need to make you the last statement, as the 3 minutes were already over. Sorry.
छोटू एंड फिनिश कर दो आप जो बात बोल रहे हो। हाँ
जी, तो मैं अपनी बात को यहीं से फिनिश करता हूँ। धन्यवाद।
I'm just translating what Chotu just shared. Chotu is just 20 years old and he's from Katihar, Bihar. He was rescued 10 to 11 years ago by Bachpan Bachao Andolan. And from there, he went on to study in Bal Ashram, which is a long-term rehabilitation center in Rajasthan. After that, he started working as a mechanical engineer, mechanical electrician in his own village, went back to his own village to start education circle. Mukti Karwa is also a campaign which is against child trafficking and child labor, ending child trafficking. Chotu is leading Mukti Karwa from his village right now. And Mukti Karma is specifically running in 10 districts of Bihar, which are highly trafficking prone districts. With this, what Chotu has done, Chotu is actually teaching close to 40 children who are under the age of 18, who were some were rescued by Bachma Chanul and some are from the village. Chotu is the first generation learner from his own village and is trying to create a education circle in his own network, in his own village. And he's trying to create a awareness campaign by door-to-door visits and talking to the village councils, the panchayat leaders, the sarpanches of his own village and the nearby villages. This campaign is specifically run by survivor activists like Chotu. Chotu is accompanied by other survivor leaders in his own village and around his village. He's saying that young children specifically from these districts are trafficked to Chhattisgarh, Punjab, and other states for cheap labor, and girls specifically are trafficked for commercial sexual exploitation. Chotu says that by this awareness campaign, he's trying to create a safety net for children, specifically for children who are dropped out of schools, who can't afford to go to private schools, especially because of the lockdown in the country. In this situation, they are trying to survey different villages and trying to map who is migrating from which place to which city, which village, so that a village migration register can also be formed and they can be informed, survivor leaders in the districts can be informed. And Chotu wants, his dream is to create a free, safe, and educated childhood, not just in his village, but in his state and the country. So, with this awareness campaign, he's trying to connect more young people, volunteers in the district, so that they can together stand up and be the voice of other marginalized young children. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this contribution and your engagement. Now, the 100 Million campaign is a powerful mixture of grassroots activists working with and from the most marginalized communities directly, and also with representatives of youth and student organizations, who you will hear from as our next speaker. I am honored to introduce Jafet Ntala, the president of MNSU, the Malawi National Student Union. Jafet has supported a stronger role for student activists in national decision-making and is a leading voice for young people in Malawi. How has COVID-19 affected vulnerable children and young people in Malawi?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity given. Yeah, in the 3 minutes given, I would want to explain in this manner. Malawi, just like many of the the rest of the countries has been heavily affected by the pandemic. And one major issue that has arisen to the vulnerable children and even the youth in Malawi is about teenage pregnancies and child marriages. From the closure of schools, which happened on 20th March this year, up to around June, and even this far, we have witnessed rampant cases of teenage pregnancies and child marriages. I will provide some proven facts. According to the African Institute of Development Policy, Malawi is 11th in the world in terms of highest rate of child marriages. And recently, I'll just provide one example of one district, or rather one province, which has witnessed and the highest number of young people being affected by the effects of COVID-19. One of such district is found in the eastern region of the country, and we have witnessed about 7,274 teenage pregnancies. And this came into effect because of students being idle, because schools were closed. So you'd imagine about 7,274 girls. That's a huge number for us. And so this was information provided by the district youth healthy service coordinator, who had provided such information. And this happened within the range of January through June. Yes, so this has largely affected the nation, particularly vulnerable children, and the youth. Another thing has been loss of jobs by the youth. We know in our country there are a lot of youth that graduate from colleges, but getting out of institution, they don't straight away find themselves into workplaces. So others would need to start their own businesses, and sort of. But because of the closed borders, you would see that businesses were hugely interrupted, and even the closure of companies and the reduced workforce in such companies increased youth that have been hit by the jobless situation.
I am so sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contribution. That was so important to hear.
Welcome.
Finally, we will hear from Iris Kimitzglu from FZS, the National Student Union in Germany, and a long-standing champion for equality and the board member responsible for International Committee. Iris, in your opinion, why is it important that high-income countries such as Germany advocate for greater financial support for lower-income countries during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you for inviting me today. The FZS, we strongly believe that we have to take responsibility because Western countries have taken a huge part in colonization, in exploitation, and brain drainage in other countries. To recognize this responsibility also means to help out during a time like COVID. We need to stand in solidarity and provide especially developmental aid, but also equipment and expertise in order to ensure that due to the pandemic, global injustice and global inequalities aren't solidified. One way to help out would be, of course, money, which is the common denominator of all the problems. but also political pressure and political help is a form of being able to help out, because as we have heard, the abuse of women and children is on a rise. We could help by taking in patients from other countries which aren't able to access medical aid right now. We need to open our visa regulations again, because right now students from non-Western countries mostly aren't allowed to enter Western states in order to study, not even scientists. Nobody is allowed to enter, which furthers brain drainage. And lastly, we believe that we could also help by providing information and scientific knowledge regarding COVID. As soon as we have vaccinations, we need to hand them to those who need them the most, and that's not Western countries. Our healthcare systems are good, they are sufficient. So in order to overcome COVID, we need to overcome borders. We need to recognize our role in the world, and we believe that only in solidarity and unity there's strength. And I believe that's all I have to say today.
Thank you. Together louder, together stronger, I agree. And thank you, Iris, for another and your powerful contribution. I just have to say that sadly, Blessing isn't able to connect because of their internet connection. And I already mentioned before that she has recently formed 100 Million Nigeria with other youth activists and has done great work. It shows that the digital gap and also internet connection, especially in rural communities, is a huge issue we have to tackle. Yeah, but with these words, I can give the word to Giuseppe Belipari for session 2, who will be your facilitator from Global Students Forum. And I thank you for everyone who was at the panel at session 1.
Thank you very much, Alex. I hope you can see me. I'm really pleased to be taking you through the next session. First of all, I would like to thank all the people that are following us here, but also on our social media channels. So thank you very much for being here. Moving to the topic, the situation on the ground is extremely challenging because we are now giving the less, while it's really important to give support in this terrible situation of the pandemic. And so this session will be really about how we got here. Why are we here? Why are we in this terrible situation? I want to give you just an example that is really, I think, a shameful injustice. The fact that the G20 announced this kind of global COVID-19 support package for support, for the countries that are at the moment living in the worst conditions, are suffering the worst effects of the pandemic. And well, just the 0.13% of $8 trillion have been spent on multilateral funds by the G20, while we know that we have just one country of the G20 countries is in Africa, and no low-income countries, of course, are in the G20 for how the G20 is structured. So this is a big problem, just to show how this inequality works. And of course, I won't do this alone, but I will leave the floor to incredible speakers who all have, as always, 3 minutes to speak each one. Really, just to be strict on time, it's really important to allow us to go and to listen to any of us. So the first speaker we are really glad to have this person here, is from Education International. There is the Global Teachers Union. There is also a member of the 100 Million campaign and has also great relationships with the organizations of students, so students' unions, and also to activists, with student activists across the world, and especially in the last 25 years. So I'm really happy to introduce you Antonia Wolf, herself a former student activist from Obessu, and I'm delighted to introduce her to open the session. So the floor, Antonia, is fully yours.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. So I'm speaking today on behalf of Education International, which is the global federation of teacher unions representing about 32 million teachers and education support personnel across the globe. And I'm here today to express our support and our solidarity with you. As you know, COVID-19 is often framed as a cause for inequality. Yet we know that COVID has rather just deepened and exacerbated structures of inequality that has shaped our world for decades and centuries. And that means that never before has the need for democratic movements, representative student organizations, representative youth organizations, trade unions, never before has the need for us been greater. And that's why I'm really so pleased to be with you today, because for too long, other people have claimed to speak on behalf of young people. They've claimed to know what you want, what you need, whether they've been companies, organizations, governments, and yet they've failed to reflect your demands. They've failed to convey an understanding for what you've really been asking for the income inequality that you've been challenging, the poverty you've been calling out, your demands for gender equality, for human rights, for social justice, for climate justice. And they've dared to claim that they speak on your behalf, that they understand the situations that you're in. As teacher unions, we fight for the right of teachers, for the rights of students to be represented, to be part of decision-making in education, be part of determining the priorities in education. But as teacher unions, we also stand alongside you in the demand for a redistribution of power, a redistribution of resources in what is a fundamentally unequal world, where some countries and some forces keep benefiting, keep profiting on the rights and the well-being of others. So this is really a crucial moment in time to ensure that young people, representative movements of students, of young people, have their legitimate voice in decision-making, in society. And that's wherever in the world you live. Wherever in the world you live, you have a right for your voices to be heard, for your demands to shape your local societies and the world at large. So as Education International, we look forward to walking alongside you, fighting alongside you, and seeing some change sooner before later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Of course, we couldn't agree more with these words. I'm really happy also for this global nature of the problem to introduce another speaker that is coming from a really important country, that is Mexico, Miss Cynthia Lopez Castro, that is a member of the parliament and also a member of the Global International Parliamentarian Union Young Parliamentarians Forum. She champions the involvement of young people and women in politics. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Castro. And can I ask, what would you like governments around the planet to do to improve representation and inclusivity for all young people in decision-making processes?
Thank you, Giuseppe. Hello, everybody. Greetings from Mexico. And I'm very happy to be here with you. Well, dear youth leaders, dear friends, it is a great honor to be here with you today for this important event on behalf of the IPU Forum of Young Parliamentarians, For those who don't know, the IPU is the global organization of parliaments. We represent 179 countries and over 90% of the world population. I am proud to say that youth participation is one of our organization's strategic priorities. The IPU Forum of Young Parliamentarians is a permanent body of the organization. It is a place where young MPs from all around the world meet to discuss actions to strengthen youth participation and the integration of their perspectives into the work of Parliament. Simply put, is the global voice of the world's young MPs. So, well, around the world is under 30, despite having the numbers all too often, our participation has been in the streets or today in the social media that rather than in formal bodies. After centuries, our political institutions have still not succeeded in sufficiently including young men and women in. So we have very much to offer for our conviction to realize the changes we believe in, to innovative ways of solving problems. Exclusion not only leads of the marginalization of young people and their loss of confidence in our democracies, but it is also an incredible waste of our talents. So I regret to inform you, however, that we are far from where we need to be. Despite half the world being under 30 years of age, only 2% of the world's MPs are under their 30 years. So leaders on the global stage are also most likely to be more senior politicians. If we want young people to be empowered, we simply must be better represented in politics. Democracy needs an equitable representation of the population, both men and women of all ages in the decision-making processes. So the IPU has known this for years. In 2020, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of our landmark resolution on youth participation in the democratic process and adopted by member parliaments. Is what started the IPU youth movement, and the resolution declares that achieving a meaningful democracy requires the full and active participation of young people and youth organizations in the democratic processes and levels. So to harness the power of youth to contribute to democracy and the challenges we all face, the IPU young MPs have been pushing for a series of of concrete proposals. I wish to share a few of them here with you today. First, legal barriers that close the door for young men and women to run for office must be removed. The IPU calls for countries to align the age to run for elections with the voting age. If you are old enough to vote, you should not be too young to run. Second, special measures to ensure that young people are included and needed. The most effective way to do this is through youth quotas. And third, although we call for more young men and women in office, we also need those are already there to carry more weight and influence policy making. The IPU promotes having young MPs in leadership position, and it is also the only international organization that has put statutory incentives for countries to include young MPs as delegates at international meetings. So measures such as these at meetings like G20 will go a long way to ensure more youth voices are included. I would like to share with you that I have the opportunity of running in an election for my first public service position at 21 years of age. In Mexico, the voting age is 18, and now we are working at establishing a law that eliminates that voting for oneself can only begin 3 years after one has the right to vote. As we mentioned here, it is important if you are old enough to vote, you might also be elected that very same year. So I like to share with you that in Mexico, I had the opportunity to be legislator for the first time when I was 28 in Mexico City's Congress. And we created a law, and in the Constitution of Mexico City, we established it as a constitutional right, guaranteeing that 1 in every 10 city councils be young persons under 29 years of age. So I'm deeply proud of promoting youth quotas in my country, and that today it's an open youth to participate. So the average age in, for example, in my country is 33 years, and we are underrepresented, and we need young people to have areas of representation at local, state, and federal level. So I am convinced that we must provide a new generation to politics in our countries, and this will be only possible by way of guaranteeing youth quotas so that they can participate with their ideas, with their fresh views, with the authenticity that characterizes them, and that will be achieved this only by striving from different positions as the Interparliamentarian Union has done. So through all these affirmative actions, innovating as an organization by way of youth quotas. I invite you all to continue participating actively in the transformation of your countries. Let us be the generation of change and social transformation. Well, I speak to you at the time of great instability in the world, COVID-19, but one change has been exposed, vulnerabilities in all the countries. If we want to invest in solutions for a more resilient world, we must prioritize investing in youth. We must prioritize including youth in our political processes, and we must prioritize investment in areas that empower youth, such as education, job, and so on. So I hope we can continue to strengthen the link between us and the youth leaders like you to reach the common goals. Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you in this summit.
Really, thank you very much, Ms. Castro. It has been a great pleasure, especially in this situation of awakening democracies. Democracies in danger all across the world. It's really important to underline the role of legislative assemblies and or the role of young people in these assemblies. So thank you very much, and thanks to your organization for being part of the international level of this process. So thank you very much. Next, I'm also really happy to introduce, well, first of all, I would like to say thank you very much again to the participants, because I was just told that we have more than 150 participants that we can know name by name. So thank you very much for being here. Again, it's a great number for this kind of event. Thank you very much. What I would like to introduce now is an Italian activist called Tommaso Carlini, that comes from the National Secondary School Student Union of Italy, RSM. So, Tommaso, on top of your organization's important work in Italy, we know that the government of Italy is going to be the presidency of the G20 in 8 weeks. So our question for you is, what are your thoughts on the G20 as a forum and the role of G20 as a global decision-making body for the world?
Hi to everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. This is a very difficult historical moment. All of the world has been shaken by an unprecedented calamity. To pay the higher price of this social, economic, and humanitarian crisis are the low-income countries, the developing countries, and all those who live in poverty conditions around the world. We are going to live a new global economic crisis which will change the geopolitical balances and could open many different and catastrophic scenarios. The desperation and fear could lead to the growth of far-right movement and authoritarian movement that can risk the democracy democratic unity of many countries. On the 21st of November, all the representatives of the most industrialized countries, in which one is Italy, will unite to discuss in matter of realizing opportunities of the 21st century for all. This is the theme of the general of the G20. We can't accept that the most powerful countries will discuss on how to improve the economy of the third world countries and the developing countries without having them represented. Most of all because these world powers are the principal cause of the problems of these countries. The host of this summit will be Saudi Arabia, an absolute monarchy which economy is based on oil and that violates many human and civil rights. How can Saudi Arabia promote world peace and equality since they are one of the causes of the disequality? In Saudi Arabia, the real world changers are behind the bars. We need an international, world. We need a new world based on international solidarity, mutual help, and the redistribution of wealth and resources. Especially in this historical moment in which the disparity gap between different social classes and between different countries is so much enlarged. This is a work that only a real summit made by internationalists can do. I don't believe that Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, Jair Bolsonaro, King Salman, and many other representatives of the G20 as promoters of a global political system based on war, exploitment, and disparities can really work to change these world problems. We really need a new representative way to take decisions, which is imprinted on a new solidarity and internationalist world. What we really need is the power to the people. Thank you very much for letting me talk today, and thank you very much.
Grazie, Tommaso. Thank you very much, Tommaso, for your perspective from Italy. So next, we will hear from Joanna Reyes, I hope my pronunciation was good, an activist from Trinidad and Tobago. So Joanna, in what ways are young women, girls, and other marginalized groups excluded from the decision-making process at both the national and global international level? So the floor is yours.
Hi, good day, everybody. In the Caribbean, we have failed, to decolonize. We have failed to do the necessary research and investment into ourselves and our region, and we have held on to colonial systems and structures to our own detriment. In this public health crisis, these failures have manifested as and exacerbated as economic crises, care deficits, and the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence, with disproportionate impacts on women, inequalities between groups of women based on race, disability, income, and age have been starkly apparent in both the spread and impact of the virus. The impact on the labor market and income in Latin America and the Caribbean, published by the ILO, has been telling as women more than men, and young people up to 24 years old more than adults have been experiencing job losses more intensely, thus widening previous employment gaps. This means a decrease in the capacity for young people here to socially reproduce themselves, protect themselves from abuse, and decreases the ability to participate in the political processes and organize. This is a problem, especially for young women in Latin America and the Caribbean. as our Latin American sisters contend with machismo, and in the Caribbean, we grapple with various creolized terms and manifestations of toxic masculinity. My organization, Womantra, has documented 20 femicides for the year thus far in Trinidad and Tobago. This heart-wrenching list includes Trinidadian women, Venezuelan migrant women, and in this particular instance, a child born with a disability. And in light of this, the advocacy continues. We have gotten here as a region by continuing to ignore the cries of our young women and children and blaming them when they succumb to the tragedy of a patriarchal society. The neoliberal analysis must transform into a socialist one so as to cater to the geographical and cultural communities, not just the recognized majorities. The policy supports and cultural changes for women, girls, and persons with disabilities to thrive in a region are often considered unjustifiable hardships. The pandemic has further destabilized the region, but it is also an opportunity for us to build back better. It is an opportunity for us as youth leaders to advocate for the implementation of gender-sensitive budgeting, temporary special measures, and channels for greater political participation to support communities previously neglected and are thrown further into disrepair by the pandemic. This is our chance to demand real conversation on decolonization and reparations so that we can move forward on an equal footing, ensuring that everyone has their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. It has been a really powerful insight in this kind of problem, and it's really important to tackle all of these inequalities in this phase. So really, thank you very much for being here. Now I would like to introduce also a friend, I would say, a really important activist, that is the president of the Union of Exiled Students of France. So, Rudy, you represent exiled students and their rights, especially about access to higher education, university. In your experience, how do you think young people who have been exiled, migrants or refugees are represented in political processes?
Hello, Giuseppe. Thanks a lot for inviting me today. It's amazing to see you guys again. Actually, we have here to recognize between two different files, formal and non-formal. Today, there is 26 million refugees in the whole world. This is according to HCR. So if we are talking about the formal file, we have to know that there is only way that we can give to the refugees to talk, to have participate in the political life. It's giving the right of voting. So if you don't have the right to vote, you don't have a say on the issue that's directly affected your present life. So in the majority of countries, refugees don't have rights to vote. That means that they don't have any political voice, and they don't have any representative and any representing in the political life. Today in the Europe, we have an initiative which is started by the Commission, the European Commission. It's a group of experts, refugees or persons who have a background of refugees, to participate on discussions groups and without any voice. Actually, they are just there to participate without giving any voice. It's just like to give them like advice. If we are talking about the non-formal file, it's like civil society. The refugees in the social society, they are like a decoration actually in this file. Why? Because the most things we have to recognize here, that the fact that refugees integrate in the host society, it's to give them to give them this possibility to act. In the civil society, they are just there without any voice too. So we can say that refugees are not represented at all, not in the formal field and not in the political field and formal field. The problem that this is what we notice, and for us, like a Union of Exiled Students, we decided that we have to give a voice to us, and we start building this Union of Exiled Students to have a voice. We're still working hard because today there is a lot of problems to avoid us to have this voice, because there is like a political decisions. Societies, civil need to give us a lot of opportunity, and they still looking to us like how we can say it, like a concurrence to them goals and to them things. I don't know if there is a problem on my laptop.
No, I think it was just because the time was over, so probably it switched automatically. So I don't know, do you want to say just a closing sentence and we move on, Rudy?
Yeah, I just want to say that the fact that giving refugees access to the political decisions, it's important to give us a key of integration. And without this access, without this possibility, we cannot build an integration and an initiative to the future citizenships, which they are refugees in the host countries. Thanks a lot.
Really, Rudy, thank you very much. As always, was really interesting, and also its perspective is quite unique. So it's really important always to hear from you and to continue together this battle towards also migrant and refugee participation rights. The next speaker, that is the final speaker of this session, is Leandra, a youth activist that comes from Malawi. So my question is, how can young people hold leaders to account on their responsibilities, and what can countries, states learn from your experience of effective youth governance? So Leandra, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So there are always barriers that mar for young people's engagements to hold leaders to account for their responsibilities. But in the presence of all these obstacles, such as government structures, lack of resources, and lack of education, young people should always feel that they have a duty to engage in civic activity. And this role probably will not change the world in just a snap, but it helps to open up dialogue. And through dialogue, young people's voices are always and can be amplified into action. And of course, this can lead to a meaningful change. And just like many other young people have, I was also privileged to attend a social accountability training twice with support from both voluntary service overseas, that was in Malawi, and Youth Alive Kenya, that's Kenya. And I learned of the critical tools that we as young people can use in as far as holding leaders accountable is concerned. So I learned tools such as using community scorecard, as well as use of service charter. And all I'm saying is that organizations, as well as institutions and international organizations, I should say, have an important role to play in supporting young people as leaders through trainings, as well as directing them to opportunities that they should engage themselves with in holding leaders accountable on their duties. And from my experience, on effective youth governance across the world. Countries should know that youths are passionate and youths are very creative nowadays, but all they need is space to expose their innovativeness, provide solutions, and prepare the future generations not to face the things that we are facing right now. We are facing insecurities, imbalances, as well as exclusions. And on behalf of my fellow youths, I would like to conclude that if they want, let us dream. We want, let them sleep. My name is Leandra Piri, and I'm from Malawi. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So thank you very much. Really powerful and also really concise. So thank you even more. And so thanks also to all of the excellent speakers we had during this session that pleased us with their presence. Now we are moving to the final session. So I'm really glad to give the floor to Sebastian Berger, the Vice President of the European Student Union.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. This third session is looking at what we want, and in particular, the call for a fair share. During COVID-19, we have seen 8 trillion announced for companies and people in high-income countries, and next to nothing for the 20% of young people who live on less than $2 a day and have been extremely hit by the crisis. Humanity has faced a common enemy like never before, and we have reacted in an incredibly unequal and immoral way. I'm delighted to introduce our final external speaker, Kailash Satyarthi. Kailash has dedicated his life to supporting the rights of children and young people. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for rescuing over 80,000 children from child labor and leading a global march across 100 countries. Kailash has been a real champion of youth rights, and since youth leaders suggested the idea of a fair share in May, which demands the €1 trillion dollars of the global financial response to COVID-19 to be allocated in support measures to the world's most marginalized children and youth, he has secured support from over 80 Nobel laureates and raised the issue with governments across the world. He is a true friend of youth activism. And Kailash, I would like to invite you to share your thoughts on why we need a fair share for the world's most marginalized children and young people.
Thank you, Seb, and dear friends. I am so thrilled to be talking to you. Can you hear me? Start yes, my video, yes? Good. Yes. So I'm talking to elected representatives of the young people from various walks of life, right from the universities and colleges, student unions to the young parliament members. So that's quite thrilling. When I address today, I feel that I'm addressing the hope. I'm addressing the courage. I'm addressing the compassion, and I'm addressing the loudest voice to make this world a better and just place. We all know that pandemic has brought a lot of devastating effect on the most marginalized children of the world, young people of the world. But much more devastating and unacceptable is the behavior of the global leaders towards them. The much more devastating is the lack of compassion, the lack of priority for those children, lack of political will. And that's why your voices are must to challenge this apathy, inertia, and these gaps, and also to change them. We know that 21 million children may not come back to their schools, to their classrooms after this pandemic. We also know that millions of children will fall into child labor, slavery, trafficking. as the reports came from UNICEF and ILO, that has never happened in last 2 decades. Someone like me who has been fighting against child labor and slavery for all my life, for more than 40 years, I am appealing to you, my dear friends. We cannot allow, we cannot accept to turn the clock back. We have to act now. We also know that a minimal has been allocated for the marginalized children from the World COVID Response Fund. Nobel laureates and leaders have released a report recently, and that was so shameful, I would say, when we learned that out of $8 trillion which were earmarked to rescue their own economies and companies and financial institutions, only 0.13% has been allocated for the marginalized people, and much more minimal for their children. And therefore, we strongly demand that there should be fair share for children. Fair share, not only for these marginalized children now, but fair share should be a campaign, should be a culture, should be our way of life. Fair share in politics for young people. Fair share in economy for the marginalized people. Fair share in society for the children who are left out, for the young people who are left out and largely ignored. Dear friends, politicians may forget the importance and the very nature of interconnectedness of this world. But you and I cannot, because the world is in your hands, my dear youth. I recall a young lady whom I freed from intergenerational slavery. Her name was Devli, many years ago. And when I freed her and she saw the daylight, she asked a question: why didn't you come early? I was ashamed. Whom are we waiting for? We can act now. And therefore, in the fair share, we are demanding that at a minimum, $1 trillion should be earmarked should be allotted and given to the marginalized children so that they should not fall into slavery and child labor. We cannot allow this to happen. Dear young friends, many of us have been separately, or in some cases through the organizations, have been demanding justice for children. We have been demanding that the government should prioritize the marginalized children and give them the fair share. But perhaps our voices were not so loud as needed. And today, when I am addressing to you, my dear young friends, I strongly feel, as I said at the beginning, that you are hope. If we speak in union, if we raise this voice in union for the fair share, they cannot ignore it. No power of the world can ignore and avoid and reject the loudest moral voice of young people of the world. And I'm so confident to see you all here. I once again call upon you. My dear young friends, let us march towards a new dawn. Let us march from darkness to light. Let us march from exploitation to education, from injustice to justice. Let us march to bend the arc of history in favor of the most marginalized. You and I will do it. This is going to happen. Change is knocking on the door. Change is knocking on the door. G20 leaders have to listen to the voices of young people, because these are the voices which represent the voice of silence. These faces of young people represent the faces of the true humanity, the faces of most ignored and marginalized people. Everybody has to listen to them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so happy and hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kailash, not only for your inspiring words, but also for everything you have done for children and young people out there. The next speaker is Eyasu Geto, the president of the Ethiopian Students' Union and one of the leading organizations within the All African Students' Union. Eyasu, this question goes to you. Ethiopia has one of the world's largest populations, yet it is unrepresented in forums like the G20. Why do you think the global COVID-19 response should be distributed in a more equal way? Eyasu, can you hear us? Eyasu seems to have problems with taking the floor. We can move on to another speaker in the meanwhile. Eyasu, one last chance. Then we take another speaker and come back to you. All right. So we would move on to Roshana from the Brazilian School Students Union. If she is here.
Oi, oi.
Very good. Hi. Good to have you with us. The question that goes to you is, what has been the impact of COVID-19 and the pandemic on children and young people who have not received their fair share, especially with regards to their education? If you could give us your perspective.
Queria primeiro agradecer o convite de participar desse ato tão importante. Eu sou Rosana, presidente da União Brasileira dos Estudantes Secundaristas. Aqui no Brasil, o nosso país tem sofrido muito com os impactos da Covid-19, principalmente porque a Covid-19 traz consigo o agravamento da desigualdade social, que aumenta o desemprego, que aumenta a fome, que tem aumentado a evasão escolar. Aqui no Brasil, o presidente da República, Jair Bolsonaro, colabora para as mortes dos jovens e de toda a população brasileira. Os alvos principais aqui no Brasil são os jovens negros, que têm sofrido, porque fazem parte, em maioria, de todas essas estatísticas que citei anteriormente, do desemprego, da fome, da evasão escolar. Esses jovens estão tendo os seus sonhos, os seus mais belos sonhos, destruídos por um presidente irresponsável. Por aqui, a gente tem denunciado a violação de um direito que é garantido na Constituição brasileira, que é o acesso à educação. A partir do momento que o governo Bolsonaro, o governo que hoje está à frente da presidência do nosso país, ignora e não combate a exclusão digital, ele colabora para estudantes que estão há mais de 6 meses, no total 7 meses, sem acessar a educação. Estão vulneráveis à violência do tráfico, vulneráveis à violência policial, que aqui no Brasil também é muito presente, vulneráveis à destruição de seus sonhos. Por isso, aqui a gente tem lutado pela democratização do acesso à internet, pela valorização das nossas escolas, pelo combate à fome, que nesse momento também é muito grande, porque muitos estudantes brasileiros se alimentavam só na escola, então a desnutrição infantil também é um dado que tem aumentado nesse momento aqui no Brasil. Esses são os impactos negativos que a Covid-19, junto com o governo irresponsável que temos agora aqui no país, tem trazido para os jovens estudantes brasileiros. Por isso, desejo força para as companheiras e os companheiros desse ato. Peço também forças aqui para os estudantes brasileiros que continuam lutando pela democratização do acesso à internet e para que a gente coloque a educação no centro do debate para a superação da pandemia do coronavírus. Sem falar da educação,
Não há país que supere as crises que a pandemia tem trazido consigo. Por isso, a gente continua batalhando daqui. Deseja força para vocês, pede forças também e agradece por poder participar desse ato tão importante com líderes jovens de tantos países. Dizer que o Brasil está sempre à disposição e que continuamos nessa luta em defesa da educação e da juventude de todo mundo.
Thank you very much for your remarks. We will now hear the English translation.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Merci beaucoup.
I'm sorry, I am hearing the French translation right now.
J'entends l'interprétation française, donc c'est assez perturbant.
Okay.
We are checking to solve the issue. It wouldn't be a global conference without some technical translation issues. Give us a second. All right, we should be good now. Let's give this one more try. The floor is yours. So for the translation, can we try one more time? That the person who does the translation into English takes the floor now. Yes, we can hear you. No worries, no problem at all.
Equality that already existed in the
Donc,
country.
concernant les inégalités qui existaient déjà dans notre pays.
Again, I am hearing the French translation. I'm so sorry.
Encore une fois, j'entends l'interprétation en français, je m'excuse.
Désolée.
We are going to give this one last shot to quickly solve it. Otherwise, we would just go ahead with the English statement now. And for this one statement, we won't be able to have a translation into the other languages. We're really sorry for that. But then with the next speaker, we're going to go back to the normal translation setting, if that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me here. Brazil has been suffering a whole lot throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has brought more inequality than already existed on top of unemployment, hunger, and students have been attending school much less. On top of that, our president, Jair Bolsonaro, has collaborated towards the high rate of deaths in the country. Especially, this is a problem concerning young Black men. Young Black men and young Black people have been suffering much more of the rates of all of these problems: inequality, lack of jobs, and hunger as well. They participate a lot in the unemployment rates. The dreams of many students have been shattered by Jair Bolsonaro, the president. The access to education is a part of the Constitution of Brazil, and Bolsonaro ignores this and ignores also digital exclusion of young people who cannot have access to internet. He also collaborates to the fact that students are not able to access education because of their lack of internet. And it has now been 7 months since some students have been able to attend school. Democracy means having access to internet and fight against hunger. Many students have also been suffering from more hunger because some of them were only able to have their daily meal at school. So COVID-19 plus the absolutely horrible actions of the government have been terrible for young students. And so I give strength to everyone fighting against this. And I also ask for strength to those who are fighting for the access to internet. Because without education, nothing can be done. I thank you so much. I am always available and I will keep on fighting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosanna, and thank you also very much for the translation. Please, one more time, excuse the hiccup we had before. But our wonderful technical team just notified me that we are now joined by Iyasu Getu, the president of the National Union of Students in Ethiopia. Iyasu, can you hear us now? Are you here? Iyasu, are you here? Can you take the floor? Can you hear us? That does not seem to be the case. I just saw in the chat that he's gone again. I think there's a very bad connection at the moment. So I would move on to our next speaker, which is Shreya from the United States. We are super happy that you're with us. Shreya, for you, the question would be, what is your expectation for world leaders to listen to our demands and agreeing on them? And why do you think that young people need to be there, and what should they do next in this ongoing fight for more justice?
Hi, everyone. My name's Shreya. I believe it is essential for our country's leaders to accept and move forward with the fair share demands and act immediately, no matter what administration we have in the next 4 years in the United States. Specifically, I hope to see more action from our leaders in ensuring education equity in the United States. Due to the pandemic, many public schools lack the funding required to provide the best education possible for students, which has increased inequities. Funding should be provided to ensure equal access to education resources and to guarantee that children are safe and have the help that they need. In addition to focusing on marginalized children within the United States, it is essential that our leaders focus on providing international funding as well as protecting marginalized children globally. During this time with increased food scarcity, lack of resources, and lack of proper educational resources, it is essential that funding is directed to make certain that marginalized children across the globe can still have access to their basic rights. As young people, we need to continue to fight for children across the globe. In order for our demands to be heard and acted upon by our leaders, it is crucial that we hold our leaders accountable. We all need to do our best to gain a global perspective by listening to youth across the globe and sharing these demands with others, to have them join us in demanding a fair share from our decision makers. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreya, as always, for your inspiring words. And a big thank you to all of the speakers we had today from around the world. Unfortunately, our colleague from the National Union of Students in Ethiopia did not manage to reconnect, and we're a bit short of time. We were hoping to have a Q&A session where we could extend the discussion a bit from our panelists to you as attendees. But however, if you look at the time, we are afraid that we will have to move on to the closing statements. And I think for us, it's really important to say that you should continue the debate and discussions nevertheless on social media using the hashtag Justice for Every Child, so we can further amplify the important message of this summit, the important message that you all conveyed today. For the closing session, to close our time together today, we want to end on the voices of almost 100 youth leaders from 45 countries who came together before this event to collectively agree a set of demands for world leaders to deliver a just, equal, and moral response to COVID-19. We met a few days ago for 3 hours across 4 languages and with nearly as many technical hiccups as we had today, to stand in solidarity with each other during these unprecedented and scary times. We've learned how the pandemic has affected us all and how those with the least are paying the heaviest weight and the highest price. In contrast to world leaders, especially the G20, who have so far failed to demonstrate any true sense of global compassion, responsibility, or urgency, we as young leaders are united in our belief that we are stronger together and that we refuse to be silent while any of us, wherever they live in the world, are suffering. To read our demands and to convey the message from the Youth Caucus that was organized this week, I invite Martina Damenin and Samuel Adondeng from the European Students' Union and the All African Students' Union to give us their remarks based on the outcomes of the Youth Caucus. The floor is yours, Martina and Samuel.
Thank you, Sebastian, and thank you to all the speakers. It is an honor to speak and relay the demands that have been put together in the Youth Caucus, and I won't take too much time. Our collective demands are as follows, and the first package of those demands is that we demand that world leaders deliver an equal, moral, and fair internationalist response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this can only be achieved by firstly demonstrating genuine multilateralism, by working together to deliver an economic package that protects the world's most vulnerable communities from the impacts of the COVID-19. Secondly, by acknowledging historical injustices perpetrated by many of today's richest countries and acknowledging their responsibility to provide a greater share of the global economic response in this crisis. This responsibility entails cancelling all external debt payments in 2021 and 2022 that are due from governments of low-income countries and delivering global tax reform that finally eliminates tax havens. An equal, moral, and fair internationalist response requires that ensuring any COVID vaccination program is free and universally accessible, with the scale of production considering the needs of the global population. I'll give over to Samuel now to continue on to the second package of our demands.
Thank you, Martina. In addressing our demands, we are also demanding that national governments uphold the fundamental human rights of their citizens during the COVID-19 pandemic by doing the following: by implementing social protection measures such as universal basic income that ensures everyone is able to live in dignity without fear of hunger or homelessness, by also prioritizing the protection of free, quality, and public education systems, including meaningful support and policies addressing the digital divide that leaves millions of children and young people unable to access online learning, by also improving healthcare infrastructure and ensuring universal access, including implementing adequate hygienic measures with specific COVID-19 health protocols in schools and universities, by also recognizing the looming mental health crisis facing our generation and implementing preventative measures to support programs to address this. Martina.
The third set is that we demand that national governments give special protection for the most vulnerable children and young people during the COVID-19 pandemic, by first ensuring that countries in the global north open their borders to refugee and migrant children and young people. And as a minimum, all countries need to restart their asylum processing immediately, with a fast track for unaccompanied minors. Secondly, by providing targeted support to refugee and migrant children and young people living in host countries to ensure equal and non-discriminatory access to healthcare, to education, to civic participation, and financial support, such as decent housing during the COVID-19 crisis. Thirdly, by fully funding programs and interventions that support the safety, the rights, and the dignity of children and young people who have experienced child labor, trafficking, violence, or homelessness. And finally, that is the least that can be done, is to communicate all public health messages inclusively, to ensure that people living with disabilities, people without access to the internet, non-native speakers, and people with limited literacy skills know how to protect themselves and their communities from COVID-19. Back to you, Samuel.
By way of our final demands, we are also demanding that national and world leaders ensure that COVID-19 pandemic does not undermine democracy by doing this, by mandating that national government formally consult with and place value on the input of students, of young people, and their elected representative unions on their COVID-19 response planning, by also challenging the rise of fear-based fascist, nationalist, and far-right ideologies with public condemnation, not tacit approval.
I think we lost Samuel. Let's see. Samuel, are you there? I think he's reconnecting. Let's give him another 20, 30 seconds. Otherwise, I think I would ask Martina to take over with the final demands.
In the fourth package, that is where we demand that national and world leaders ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic does not undermine democracy, includes by mandating that national governments formally consult with and place value on the input of students, of young people, and their elected representatives unions on their COVID-19 response planning. Secondly, by challenging the rise of fear-based fascist, nationalist, and far-right ideologies with public condemnation, not tactic approval. Thirdly, by immediately ceasing all criminalization of peaceful public dissent, such as the arbitrary arrests, abductions, and assassination of protesters, which are contributing to a shrinking civic space and citizen accountability. Fourthly, by ensuring national responses to COVID-19 are not generalized, but localized and relevant to the needs of each community. And finally, by providing full transparency on the distribution of funds spent on the COVID-19 response. That includes loans and any fiscal adjustments to the national budget. Thank you, Sebastian, and I give it over back to you.
Thank you very much, Martina and Samuel, for your closing remarks. I think that was a very inspiring way to finish today's event. I said it before, but it's really important that we continue the discussions on social media with our networks, with our partners, with our friends, and that we will be in touch with those who have registered with the next steps of the campaign if you want to go this way with us. Thank you all for joining and standing together. When enough young people unite and work together, we can and we will change the world. I hope you have a great rest of your day, wherever you are, and we'll stay closely in touch. Thank you everyone for your time, for taking part in this event, and take care out there. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm.